The crash was louder than it should have been. Glass exploded against the tile floor, splashing cold espresso and shards of crystal across my shoes. For a heartbeat, the cafe went silent. No laughter, no music, not even the hum of conversation. Just the ringing echo of my mistake. My hands were still trembling when I looked up, ready to mutter an apology to whoever I had nearly drenched. But the words never made it past my lips. Because it was him. The man sitting before me, sleeves rolled, jaw shadowed, eyes darker than sin itself, was the same man I had once knelt beside on a rain-slick street 3 years ago. The same man whose blood had soaked my jacket, whose pulse had faded beneath my fingers as I whispered, "Stay with me." And now, here he was alive, calm, watching me as if time had never passed. For a moment I could not breathe. The tray slipped from my grasp, still spinning on its edge before it clattered to rest beside my shoe. I crouched automatically, gathering the shards, forcing my body to move even though my mind screamed to run. Every instinct told me this was wrong, that he was not supposed to be here, not supposed to see me again. He had promised that night I would never be part of his world. And I had believed him. "Are you hurt?" His voice cut through the quiet like a blade wrapped in silk. I froze. The sound of it was deeper now, rougher, but I knew it. I could never forget it. "No," I said quickly, eyes still on the floor. "I am fine. It slipped." He leaned back in his chair, studying me with an unreadable expression. The cafe lights caught the faint scar just below his collarbone, the one I had pressed my palm against while he bled. My stomach twisted. I stood, clutching the remains of the tray, trying to find air in a room that suddenly felt smaller. "Accidents happen," he said softly. I nodded, forcing a weak smile. "Let me get you another drink." He smiled, not kind, not cruel, just knowing. "Black espresso. No sugar." The same order as before. The same tone he used when I begged him to let the ambulance come, and he refused, insisting I leave before the police arrived. My knees nearly gave out beneath me as I turned toward the counter. I tried to ignore the weight of his gaze on my back, the way every step felt heavy, deliberate, as though I was walking back into a memory I had tried to bury. When I returned with his coffee, I kept my eyes on the cup. "Here you go," I whispered. "Thank you," he said. His hand brushed mine as he took it, a brief, electric contact that burned through my skin. I flinched before I could stop myself. He noticed. Of course he did. "You look the same," he said quietly. "Only your eyes have learned to hide things." My throat tightened. "You must be mistaken. I serve hundreds of customers." "Do you?" he interrupted gently, his lips curving faintly. "Then tell me, do you always shake this much when you serve them?" I stepped back, the air too thin, the walls too close. The cafe chatter had resumed, but every sound felt muffled far away. I wanted to run to the back room, to pretend this was nothing, a coincidence, a hallucination. But deep down I knew better. "You should not be here," I whispered. "Neither should you," he replied, voice low enough that only I could hear. "You saved my life once. You think I would forget the woman who held my blood in her hands?" I stared at him, heart pounding so loudly I was sure he could hear it. His words were steady, but his eyes, those eyes, carried something else, regret, warning, and something dangerously close to longing. "I am not part of your world," I said, the words trembling as they left me. He leaned forward slightly, his fingers tracing the rim of his cup. "Then why does your voice sound like you wish you were?" I had no answer. My chest ached from holding in everything I wanted to deny. I turned away, trying to focus on the next table, the next order, the next normal moment that could erase this one. But normal was gone. The air between us pulsed with something I could not name. Not yet love, not quite fear, but the memory of both. As I wiped the counter, I felt his gaze again. I looked up despite myself. He was still watching me, calm, patient, as if waiting for something inevitable. I should have looked away. I should have done what I had promised myself years ago, forget him. But then he said my name. Not loudly, not carelessly, just soft enough that it slipped through the noise and straight into my chest, like a secret he should not have remembered. In that instant, the world stopped moving. The coffee machine hissed, the chatter blurred, and all I could hear was the sound of my heart breaking open to the past. He remembered, and I realized, with a rush of cold fear and something darker beneath it, so did I. I could not shake his voice from my mind. The sound of my name still lingered in the air long after he had left the cafe, echoing through my chest like a memory I had tried to bury too deep. I moved through the rest of my shift on autopilot, refilling cups, taking orders, smiling when expected, but my hands would not stop trembling. Every time I blinked, I saw the same image behind my eyes. Rain pooling in the cracks of a dark alley, a man bleeding out against the wall, and my own hands pressing down to keep him alive. I had been 21 then, just a nursing student walking home after a late shift at the hospital cafe. It was the sound that stopped me, gunfire, sharp and distant, followed by the screech of tires and a groan that sounded more human than anything I had ever heard. I should have kept walking. That is what my brain told me. But my feet turned before I could stop them, and there he was, on the ground, one hand clutching his chest, the other holding a gun that had already slipped from his grasp. "Stay back," he rasped when he saw me, but his voice broke before he could finish. I dropped to my knees anyway. "You are losing too much blood," I said, my hands already moving, tearing my jacket sleeve, pressing hard over the wound. He tried to push me away weakly. "You do not know who I am." "I do not care," I whispered. "You will die if I do nothing." He laughed, an empty, breathless sound that turned into a groan. "Then you are either brave or very stupid." The rain fell harder, washing the blood down the pavement. I remember the smell of it, iron and fear, and the way his eyes looked when he met mine. Not cruel, not kind, just human. A man who was not ready to die. I called for an ambulance, but he grabbed my wrist before I could finish dialing. "No hospitals," he said. "They will finish what they started." I stared at him, terrified and confused. "You have been shot. You will not make it without help." He gritted his teeth, forcing his body upright. "You need to leave now. If they see you with me, you will not make it either." But I did not leave. I stayed there, pressing against his wound until the bleeding slowed. I tore fabric from my shirt, wrapped it around his chest, and prayed he would survive long enough for someone, anyone, to find him. He looked at me like he was memorizing my face. "What is your name?" he asked quietly. "It does not matter," I said. "You are losing strength. Keep your eyes open." He smiled faintly, the corner of his lips twitching. "If I live, I will make sure you never regret this." I remember those words more clearly than the sound of my own heartbeat. He reached for my hand and squeezed it once before his eyes fluttered shut. And then, from somewhere down the street, I heard sirens. Red and blue lights flickered at the far end of the alley. He opened his eyes again, weak but defiant. "Go," he said. "Now." I hesitated, frozen between instinct and compassion. "What will you do?" He gave me that same faint, reckless smile. "Survive. I always do." I left him there, in the rain, because he told me to. When I looked back once more before turning the corner, he was gone. No body. No blood. Just the echo of gunfire and the wet sound of thunder. For weeks afterward, I searched the news, expecting to read about a shooting, a body found in an alley, anything. But there was nothing. It was as if that night had never happened. Until today. Now he was alive, sitting in my cafe, ordering coffee as if our worlds had not collided once before in blood. And worse, he remembered me. As the sun dipped beyond the street outside, the cafe lights turned warm and golden, but my hands were still cold. My coworker joked about closing early, but I could barely hear her. My mind was somewhere else, back in that alley, reliving the moment I should have walked away. When the last customer left, I wiped the tables, locked the register, and told myself to breathe. It was just a coincidence, I whispered. He was a stranger once, and he could be a stranger again. But as I stepped outside, the street was quieter than usual. The air felt heavy still. Across the road, under a flickering street lamp, a black car idled with its headlights on. I could not see the driver through the tinted glass, but I felt the weight of their gaze, steady and unblinking. For a moment I thought I imagined it, until the engine revved softly, once like a warning. My pulse surged. I forced myself to keep walking, keys clenched tight in my fist, pretending not to notice. But I knew. Someone was waiting. And the silence of that night 3 years ago had finally followed me home. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise, though I barely remembered falling asleep. My dreams had been fragments, headlights cutting through fog, the echo of footsteps behind me, a face half-lit by rain. Every sound outside my window felt amplified. The garbage truck, the neighbor's dog, the hum of the city waking up. I told myself it was nothing. That black car from last night could have belonged to anyone. But deep down I knew better. By the time I reached the cafe, the world was already moving too fast. The espresso machine hissed, the morning rush buzzed, and the scent of roasted beans filled the air. Everything looked the same, but it did not feel the same. My skin prickled as if invisible eyes followed me from the moment I stepped through the door. "Rough night?" my coworker Lila asked, handing me an apron. I tried to smile. Could not sleep. She leaned closer. "You look like you saw a ghost." Maybe I had. I busied myself behind the counter, pouring coffee, taking orders, pretending to listen to the chatter around me. But every time the bell above the door chimed, my heart jumped. I scanned faces without meaning to: businessmen, students, couples. None of them him. Still, the unease clung to me like smoke. By mid-morning, I was so distracted that I dropped a cup. It shattered on the floor, sending porcelain shards skidding across the tiles. My manager, Mark, appeared from the back office, eyebrows raised. "Everything okay, Anna?" he asked, though his tone said he already knew the answer. "Yeah, sorry. Just tired." He studied me for a moment, then sighed. "You have been tired a lot lately. If you need a break, take one. Go outside, breathe." I nodded, grateful for the excuse. Outside, the air was cool and sharp. I leaned against the brick wall, clutching my apron. Across the street, cars passed in a steady rhythm. But between the movement, I thought I saw it again. The same black car, parked 2 blocks down. My breath caught. It was too far to make out the license plate, but I recognized the shape, the tinted windows, the way it idled just long enough to make me question my own sanity. I blinked, and when I looked again, it was gone. Back inside, Lila gave me a look. "You okay, seriously?" "I am fine," I said, forcing a laugh. "Just paranoid, I guess." "About what? The apocalypse? Mark's coffee prices?" I wanted to tell her everything. That the man who ordered a black coffee yesterday wasn't just anyone. That he was someone I once saved from bleeding out in an alley. That last night, someone was watching me leave. But the words stuck in my throat. How could I explain something that sounded like a nightmare? Instead, I said softly, "You ever feel like someone is watching you?" Lila tilted her head. "Only when I post something stupid online." Her joke didn't land. She frowned. "You're scaring me a little." "I'm scaring myself," I admitted. The day crawled forward. I tried to bury myself in routine: grind, pour, serve, repeat. But my eyes kept flicking toward the window. The city outside looked normal, but something beneath the surface had shifted. The shadows seemed thicker. The spaces between people felt charged. When the lunch rush slowed, I found myself staring at the door again, hoping and dreading that he might walk through it. And then, as if conjured by thought, I felt a shift in the air. The door opened. A man entered, not him. Just a delivery guy, headphones in, holding a clipboard. Relief washed through me, almost dizzying. I laughed quietly to myself, shaking off the tension. Maybe I really was losing it. But that feeling didn't last. Later that evening, after closing, I wiped down the last table by the window. The reflection in the glass caught my attention. My own tired face, the warm lights behind me, the street outside growing dim. Then, for a split second, another figure appeared in that reflection, tall, motionless, standing across the street. I froze. My pulse thundered in my ears. He was there. Even through the reflection, I recognized that posture, the calm menace, the way he carried stillness like a weapon. The man from yesterday. The one I saved. I turned quickly toward the street, but the spot was empty. Gone. Only the faint ripple of movement remained, like heat-bending light. Behind me, Lila called out from the back. "You ready to lock up?" "Yeah," I said, though my voice came out hollow. As I turned the key in the door, the cafe lights flickered once, like the world itself was holding its breath. And in the window's faint reflection, just before the lights went out completely, I could still see him, his outline, his eyes, watching me leave. It was just past midnight when I heard the knock. 3 short raps, deliberate, spaced, too calm to belong to a stranger. I froze in my tiny apartment, the hum of the refrigerator suddenly too loud, my breath too shallow. I had not given anyone this address except for my manager and the landlord. My fingers brushed the counter, searching for something, anything, that could be used as a weapon. Another knock. "Anna." My name. Spoken low. Firm. Familiar. The sound sliced through me like a memory. I opened the door before I could stop myself. And there he was, the man I was never supposed to see again. He stood in the hallway, the dim light catching on his jawline, his dark suit immaculate despite the hour. There was no trace of the blood, no sign of the night I found him bleeding in the alley years ago. But the same intensity burned in his eyes. A storm behind composure. "May I come in?" he asked quietly. It was not really a question. I hesitated, then stepped aside. He entered like a shadow crossing a threshold, bringing the cold with him. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. He looked around the small apartment, the second-hand furniture, the coffee cups, the books stacked on the floor. The life I had built after trying so hard to disappear. "I did not think you would find me," I finally said. He turned, his gaze sharp but not unkind. "You did not make it easy. That was the point." He almost smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "You saved my life once, Anna. I owe you for that. I did not do it for a debt. Maybe not, but someone else thinks you did." The way he said it made the room feel smaller. "What are you talking about?" He stepped closer. I could smell the faint scent of smoke and cologne, expensive, restrained. "The night you pulled me from that alley, you saw something you were never supposed to see. A few days ago, someone learned that you were the girl who helped me. They think you did more than save me. They think you talked." My stomach dropped. "I never said a word to anyone." He nodded once. "I know, but in our world, truth is irrelevant when fear is louder." I backed away until the edge of the table hit my hip. "Your world," I said quietly. "Not mine." He tilted his head, studying me. "That is where you are wrong. Do not," my voice broke. "Do not drag me back into that. I built a new life. You said I would never have to see you again." His expression darkened. "And I meant it. But they found you, Anna. And if they come, they will not care about promises I made." For a heartbeat, the only sound was the ticking of the wall clock. I felt the air shift, the pressure of something unspoken between us. "Why now?" I whispered. "Why warn me?" He hesitated. The silence in that pause was heavier than any confession. "Because someone sent men to watch you last night." My blood turned cold. "Outside the cafe?" He nodded. "They wanted to see if you were alone." I made sure they did not stay long. There was something dangerous in the calmness of his tone. I wanted to believe he was lying, that this was some twisted test, a way to pull me back into his orbit. But the look in his eyes told me otherwise. I tried to steady my breath. "So what do I do?" "You listen," he said. "You go to work, act normal, and if anyone asks questions, you say nothing. You tell no one about this conversation." I crossed my arms. "You expect me to live like that?" He took another step toward me. His presence filled the room, and my pulse quickened. "I expect you to stay alive." For a moment, neither of us moved. The distance between us was thin, charged, like static before lightning. "I do not owe you anything," I said, though my voice trembled. He looked down, then met my eyes again. "You are right. You owe me nothing. But that night, when you saved me, you became part of a story you do not understand. And now someone has decided that story should end with you." I swallowed hard, forcing my fear down. "Then I will disappear again." He shook his head slowly. "You will not make it far. They already know where to look." The words hit like a slap. I turned away, pacing, trying to think. My reflection in the window looked like someone else, someone cornered, haunted. When I finally faced him again, his gaze had softened. "I can protect you," he said, his voice almost gentle now. "But only if you stay close to me." The silence after that sentence felt alive. My heart pounded so loudly I could hear it in my ears. He waited, calm as stone, while my world tilted beneath me. And somewhere between fear and memory, I realized, whatever I chose next would change everything. I told myself I would never see him again after that night, that his warning was just fear dressed as control. But fear has a way of rearranging logic, especially when it wears a tailored suit and speaks your name like a secret. By morning, I had convinced myself it was over. I went to work, poured coffee, smiled at customers. Every routine gesture felt like a lifeline, a way to convince my heart that life was still mine. But when I stepped outside after my shift, the black car was waiting again. Not idling this time. Just waiting. One of his men, broad-shouldered, expression unreadable, opened the back door without a word. "He is expecting you," he said. I should have run. I should have called someone. But instead, I climbed in. The moment I sat down, I smelled him before I saw him. That subtle mix of smoke, metal, and something darker, like the city after rain. He sat beside me, his eyes fixed ahead, not on me. "You came," he said simply. "You did not give me much choice." He turned his head then, and the faintest trace of amusement flickered in his expression. "You always had a choice. You just made the right one." "I did not agree to anything," I replied. He nodded once, slow. "You will. There are rules now. Until this ends, you do not walk home alone. You do not open your door unless it is one of my men. You do not speak to anyone about me, about that night, or about what you saw." And what if I say no? He looked at me, really looked at me, the kind of gaze that sees beyond words. Then I cannot protect you. Something inside me twisted at that word. Protection. It sounded less like safety and more like surrender. The car moved through the city in silence. I watched the streetlights blur against the window, each one a brief flare of gold against the dark. When we finally stopped, it was outside a nondescript apartment building in the quieter part of town. "This is temporary," he said. "One of my safe places. You will stay here for a while. I have a home." "Not anymore." His tone was final, but not cruel. It was the sound of someone used to control, someone who knew resistance would eventually bend. Two men waited inside, both dressed in black, their movements efficient and wordless. They checked the windows, the doors, the corners. One of them murmured something low and fast in another language. I caught only fragments. North side movement, possible trail. I turned to him. "What are they saying?" He didn't answer right away. "They are making sure you are safe." "From who?" He looked out the window. "From everyone who remembers that night." I exhaled shakily. "You make it sound like I am already dead." He turned back to me, his voice quieter now. "No. If I wanted you dead, you would never have seen me again." The room fell into silence. The hum of the city outside faded until all I could hear was the echo of my own heartbeat. I sat down on the couch, my hands clasped tightly. He stood by the window, a silhouette against the dim light. For a moment, I wondered if he ever felt human anymore, or if power had become the only thing that kept him breathing. "I will not stay here forever," I said finally. "You will stay until I say it is safe," he replied. I laughed bitterly. "You do not get to decide my life." He glanced over his shoulder, his voice low. "You already gave me that power when you saved mine." The words hit harder than I expected. Somewhere, buried beneath the fear and confusion, was something else, a pull I did not want to name. It was dangerous, magnetic, and it terrified me more than the threat outside. Hours later, after he left, his men took turns watching the hallway. I tried to sleep, but the air felt too still. My mind replayed every moment of our conversation, every look, every unspoken truth between us. Around 2 a.m., the silence broke. It happened so fast I almost did not register it. A flash of light, a sharp crack that tore through the room. The sound of shattering glass followed, raining across the floor. I froze, my heart slamming in my chest. One of his men burst into the room, gun drawn. "Down!" he barked, pulling me behind the couch. Another bullet hit the wall, splintering wood and plaster. The apartment lights flickered, and for a moment, all I could hear was my own ragged breathing. Then silence again. The man pressed a hand to his earpiece, speaking quickly into it. "She's secure." Window hit. "Shooter unknown." Unknown. The word hung in the air like smoke. And as the glass settled around me, glittering under the streetlight, I realized what he had meant. I was not safe anywhere. And the man I should have refused was now the only one standing between me and whatever darkness wanted me gone. The morning after the shooting, he came for me himself. No driver, no guards this time, just him, standing in the doorway of the apartment that still smelled like gunpowder and fear. His sleeves were rolled up, his expression unreadable, but his eyes carried that same quiet storm I remembered from the night in the alley, the one where everything began. "You cannot stay here," he said simply. I wanted to argue, to remind him that I had a life, a job, a place that was mine. But the words stuck in my throat when I looked at the shattered glass still scattered across the floor. Safety had become an illusion I could no longer pretend to believe in. He offered his hand, not as a question but as a command dressed in courtesy. "Come with me. You will be protected." The ride was silent. The city passed by like a film reel I no longer recognized. Every streetlight, every reflection in a window felt like a ghost watching us. When the car finally stopped, we were outside a house that looked nothing like the world I came from. It was all steel and shadows, tucked behind tall iron gates that whispered of power and isolation. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cedar and something more subtle, old secrets and control. His men moved through the halls with practiced precision, speaking in low tones that stopped whenever I appeared. Every corner felt guarded, not just by guns, but by silence. "This is where you live?" I asked, my voice catching somewhere between awe and disbelief. He nodded, setting his coat on the back of a chair. "For now. It feels like a fortress." He gave a faint, humorless smile. "It has to be." He led me down a corridor lined with paintings that looked older than either of us. I wondered how many of them had been stolen, how many bought with clean money, how many with blood. He opened a door to a room that could have belonged to a stranger. Soft lighting, muted colors, and an untouched bed that looked too large for someone who slept alone. "This will be yours while you stay here," he said. "You will have privacy. My people will not enter without your permission." "You mean your guards?" I murmured. He looked at me, his voice lower now. "They would die before they let anything happen to you." I swallowed hard. "And what about you?" His eyes flickered for just a moment. "That depends on whether you let me." Something in the way he said it made the room feel smaller. There was no threat in his voice, only a strange confession, wrapped in restraint. I wanted to ask what that meant, but I did not. Some answers were better left unspoken. Days passed in a rhythm that was almost unnatural. His world ran on silence and order. Men came and went with files, coded messages, and briefcases I was never allowed to see inside. At night, I heard voices from the study, low, intense, in languages I did not understand. But sometimes, when the house went quiet and he believed I was asleep, I would hear music drifting from his piano room. Soft, broken notes, played by someone who knew how to make pain sound beautiful. It was in those moments I saw the cracks, the way he paused between songs as if haunted by something he could not forgive himself for. The way he stood by the window, cigarette between his fingers, watching the world outside as if it was something he had been exiled from. One evening, I gathered the courage to speak. "Why do you live like this?" He did not look at me. "Because peace is expensive, and I paid for it in other people's lives." "That is not peace," I said softly. His lips curved, but his eyes stayed distant. "No, but it is close enough to fool a man who stopped believing in forgiveness." The honesty in his voice disarmed me. For the first time, I did not see the boss the world feared. I saw the man from that alley, the one bleeding under streetlight, whispering that he did not want to die. Later that night, when he left for a meeting, I found myself pacing his office. I told myself I was only curious, restless, but part of me wanted to understand him, to find proof that there was still something human buried beneath the power. The desk was spotless, everything aligned with precision. Papers stacked neatly, drawers locked except one. When I opened it, I expected to find ledgers or weapons, something cold and incriminating. Instead, I found a photograph. It was worn at the edges, the kind of photo someone had touched too often. My breath caught when I saw it. It was me. Taken years ago. Back when I was still a student, hair tied back, a smile on my face that felt like a ghost now. My throat tightened. I had never given him that picture. I had never even known it existed. The door creaked behind me. I turned, my heart pounding, and there he was, standing in the doorway, eyes fixed on the photograph in my hand. "I told myself I burned that," he said quietly. "Why do you have this?" My voice trembled more than I wanted it to. He stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "Because some debts do not end when the blood dries." He stopped inches from me, the air between us charged and suffocating. "You saved my life," he said, almost like a confession. "But you also ruined it. I could never forget your face. Even when I tried. I wanted to speak, to move, but I could not." His gaze held me still, like gravity itself had shifted to pull me closer. And then he whispered, "Maybe it was not fate that brought you back. Maybe it was unfinished business." The words lingered long after he walked away, leaving me alone with the photograph trembling in my hands, and the realization that whatever tied us together had started long before that tray ever hit the floor. It was late when I found him that night, alone in the piano room, the lights dim, the air heavy with the kind of silence that follows too many unspoken truths. His jacket hung loosely over the back of the chair, his sleeves rolled to his forearms, and for once, the power he carried like armor seemed to have slipped away. The music had stopped, but his fingers were still resting on the keys, as if they were waiting for permission to remember how to feel. I lingered at the doorway for a long time, watching him. Something about the way he sat, perfectly still, head bowed slightly, cigarette burning between his fingers, made me forget for a moment who he was. He looked less like a man feared by others, and more like someone quietly punished by his own memories. "You play beautifully," I said softly. My voice startled him, though he hid it well. "I used to," he murmured. "Now I just play to forget." "Does it work?" He gave a faint, humorless laugh. "No, but silence is worse." I walked in, my bare feet brushing against the cold marble. The air smelled faintly of smoke and whiskey, the kind of scent that clings to a man who's lived through too much. I stopped a few feet away, unsure whether I was crossing a line just by being there. "You have not slept," I said. "Neither have you." It was not a question. It was an observation, one that made my chest tighten. He turned his chair slightly, studying me in that way he always did, as if I were both puzzle and answer. "I found the photograph," I said, my voice quieter now. He did not deny it. "I know. I do not understand why you kept it." He looked at the piano keys, pressing one absent note that seemed to tremble between us. "Because when you save a man's life, you own a piece of it, whether you want to or not." I frowned. "That is not how it works." He met my gaze then, and I saw something raw flicker behind his calm exterior. "Maybe not for you. But for me, every breath after that night felt borrowed. And I never knew what to do with something that was not mine." I swallowed hard. There was no arrogance in his tone, no rehearsed charm, only truth. I had spent days convincing myself he was all power and control, but sitting there, I saw what power had cost him. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked. "Surviving." His jaw tightened. "Every day that feels too quiet." He leaned back in the chair, exhaling slowly, and the smoke curled between us like a ghost of confession. "That night, I thought it was over. I saw the lights, heard the sirens, and then you. You were shaking, but you did not stop. You pressed your hands against the wound and told me to hold on. No one had ever said that to me before." I felt my chest tighten. It was instinct. Anyone would have. No, his voice was soft but certain. Not anyone. The way he said it, the way his eyes softened when they found mine, made something inside me shift. The fear that had anchored me for weeks began to loosen, replaced by something warmer, something that frightened me even more. He turned back to the piano, his voice quieter now. "After that night, I had my men find out who you were. I told them to make sure you stayed safe, to make sure the world never touched you the way it touched me." "Why?" I whispered. "Because you were the only good thing I had ever stumbled into by mistake." The words hung between us, delicate and dangerous. I felt my breath catch, my heart thudding in my chest in a rhythm that no longer sounded like fear. I stepped closer, the sound of my heartbeat louder than my footsteps. "You should not say things like that," I said softly. "Why?" "Because I might believe them." His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Maybe you should." He reached for his glass of whiskey, but his fingers brushed mine instead. The contact was accidental, brief, but enough to steal the air from the room. My hand stayed still, caught beneath his touch, and for a heartbeat, the world narrowed to the space between us. He did not pull away. Neither did I. The silence stretched, charged and trembling. I could feel the warmth of his skin, the pulse beneath it, steady, deliberate, alive. The same pulse I had once fought to save. When I finally looked up, his eyes were already on me. Not demanding, not cold, just searching, as if trying to find proof that he was not alone in this quiet, dangerous gravity pulling us together. My voice came out as a whisper. "I should go." "You should," he said. But his hand did not move. I waited for fear to return, for the reminder that this man lived in a world built on violence and secrets. But it didn't. Instead, all I felt was warmth spreading through my chest, faster, louder, and terrifyingly real. And in that moment, as I finally pulled my hand away, I realized the truth I had been avoiding since the day the tray fell. My pulse was racing not because of danger, but because of him. That night, the rain wouldn't stop. It beat against the glass like it was trying to drown the world outside. And maybe it already had. I couldn't sleep. The storm seemed to find its way inside me, every drop tapping against the window in time with the thoughts I'd been trying to silence. Somewhere down the hall, I could hear him pacing. I told myself to stay in my room, to stay out of whatever darkness he was fighting tonight. But when I heard the sound of glass shattering, my body moved before my mind could argue. He was standing by the bar when I found him, half a bottle of whiskey gone, a few shards of glass glittering near his feet. His shirt was open at the collar, his knuckles red, his breathing uneven. "Are you okay?" I asked softly. He didn't answer. Just looked up, eyes darker than I'd ever seen them. "You should be asleep." "So should you." I stepped closer, careful, like approaching a wounded animal. "What happened?" He laughed under his breath, low and bitter. "What always happens? People lie. People die. I pretend it doesn't matter." "You can stop pretending," I said. He looked at me then, really looked. And for the first time, there was no wall between us. Just exhaustion, regret, and something dangerous flickering in the quiet space where our truths touched. "I can't," he whispered. "Not in my world." I reached out, resting a hand on his wrist. Then maybe it's time you leave that world behind. He let out a shaky breath, as if the idea itself was both impossible and tempting. You don't understand, sweetheart. The moment I met you again, I knew nothing good ever comes for me without a price. And I think you might be it. His words hurt more than they should have. But I didn't pull away. I couldn't. You think I don't know danger? I said quietly. I've lived with it since that night. Every shadow, every sound. I've been waiting for it to find me again. Maybe it already has. He looked at me like the confession cut deeper than a knife. His hand came up, brushing a strand of hair from my face. The air between us went still. You shouldn't be here, he murmured. Then tell me to go. He didn't. Instead, his fingers slid to the back of my neck, slow, deliberate. I could feel the tremor in his hand, the fight between restraint and need. My breath hitched. The storm outside roared louder. And then, without warning, he kissed me. It wasn't gentle, it was desperate. A collision of everything we'd tried to bury. His lips tasted of whiskey and guilt, his hand anchoring me like he was afraid I'd vanish if he let go. For a moment, the world fell away, the danger, the fear, the lies. It was just us breathing the same broken air, clinging to a mistake that felt too right to stop. When he finally pulled back, his forehead rested against mine. Neither of us spoke. The silence said enough. This would ruin everything. I shouldn't have done that, he said finally, voice rough. I know, I whispered. Do it again. His laugh was soft, pained. You don't know what you're asking for. I do. He kissed me again, slower this time. The kind of kiss that felt like a promise, and a goodbye wrapped into one. Later, when I finally slipped back to my room, my lips still burned with the memory of him. I told myself it was just the moment, the rain, the loneliness, that it didn't mean anything. But my heart knew better. It had already crossed a line it couldn't uncross. I was still awake when dawn crept through the curtains. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed and quiet. I heard his voice down the hall, low and tense. I shouldn't have listened. But something in his tone froze me in place. She was never supposed to find out, he was saying. My breath caught. The silence that followed was louder than thunder. He'd kissed me, and lied to me in the same night. Morning light filtered through the curtains, soft and deceptive, painting the room in gold that felt like a lie. My body still remembered his touch from the night before. The warmth, the trembling honesty that had felt too real to be false. But the words I had overheard kept replaying in my mind like a curse. She was never supposed to find out. By the time I walked into the kitchen, I had rehearsed 1,000 ways to ask him what he meant. None of them felt right. None of them felt enough to cover the hollow ache spreading inside me. He was standing by the counter, coffee steaming in his hand, wearing that calm mask I had begun to recognize, the one that hid storms. He looked at me and smiled, like nothing had changed. Like my world hadn't cracked open overnight. Did you sleep? He asked. Not really. He nodded slowly, studying my face. You heard something. I froze. The air between us thickened. You knew I did? He sighed, setting the cup down. You shouldn't have. That is not an answer. My voice trembled, sharper than I intended. What did you mean when you said I was never supposed to find out? His jaw tightened. He tried to look away, but I stepped closer, forcing the truth to face me. You owe me an answer, damn it. He exhaled through his nose, steady and cold. There are things you don't understand. Things that were never meant to touch you. You kissed me, I said. You made me believe I was safe here. You are safe. No, I said, the word breaking like glass. I was safe before you found me again. Now I am trapped in your house, your world, your lies. His silence felt like confession. I took another step forward. Did you use me? He met my gaze then, not the man who had kissed me under the storm, but the one who had survived too many wars to still believe in innocence. I did what I had to do. My throat closed. So you did. He moved toward me, quick, desperate. No. Listen to me. You saved my life once. That night, the blood, the sirens, all of it, someone saw you. They've been watching you ever since. I brought you here to protect you. I shook my head. You brought me here to control me. To keep me close because I am leverage, not love. His hand found my arm, fingers tight. That's not true. Then say it, I whispered. Say you didn't lie. His eyes searched mine. But whatever he was looking for, he didn't find it. I can't. The words landed like a blade. My knees nearly gave out. I pushed him away, my heart racing with something between grief and rage. You could have told me the truth. You could have let me choose. I was trying to keep you alive, he shouted, his control finally cracking. At the cost of my trust? I snapped. You should have let me die then. Because this, I pressed my hand to my chest, where his name still echoed like a bruise. This feels worse. He stood there, breath heavy, eyes full of everything he couldn't fix. I never meant for you to get hurt. But you did, I said softly. And that is what makes it real. For a long time, neither of us moved. The silence was unbearable. The walls felt too close, the air too thin. Finally, I stepped back. I can't stay here. His voice dropped, almost pleading. If you walk out that door, I can't protect you. Maybe I don't want your protection anymore. I grabbed my bag from the chair, ignoring the tremor in my hands. He didn't try to stop me this time. He just watched, that quiet, haunted look of a man who knew he was losing the only thing that ever softened him. Outside, the wind cut through me like ice. I kept walking, faster and faster, until the mansion was just a shadow behind me. My heart was pounding, my vision blurred with tears I refused to let fall. By the time I reached the empty street, night had already begun to fall, a cruel reflection of the morning I had left behind. My phone buzzed with his name again and again, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. For the first time in weeks, I was free, and I had never felt more unsafe. I crossed the intersection, heading toward the small apartment where this had all begun. That was when I felt it, the weight of a gaze. The same chill that had haunted me before all this. I turned, expecting to see his car. But it wasn't there. A black SUV idled at the corner, headlights glaring like eyes that had been waiting for me. For one fragile second, I thought maybe he had sent his men after me, to drag me back, to make me listen. But when the driver's door opened, and I saw the symbol on the mirror, the same one carved into the crate from that night years ago, I realized something far worse. The men following me weren't his. The night air was colder than I remembered. Every breath burned as I ran. Every echo of my footsteps felt too loud. I could still see the black SUV in my mind, its headlights following me like a predator's eyes. I ducked into an alley, clutching my bag to my chest, praying the shadows would hide me. But deep down, I knew I wasn't running fast enough. The screech of tires tore through the silence. Before I could turn, a hand clamped over my mouth. The world spun, pavement, darkness, headlights, and then nothing but the smell of gasoline and leather as a hood covered my face. I tried to scream, to fight, but rough hands pinned my wrists, dragging me into the back of a van. The doors slammed shut. Time lost meaning. The van's engine roared, and I could feel every turn like a heartbeat beneath me. Fear crawled up my throat, choking me. This wasn't his doing. I was sure of it now. Whatever waited for me wasn't protection. It was payback. When the hood was finally ripped off, I was blinded by harsh fluorescent light. I blinked against it, trying to make sense of my surroundings. Concrete walls. Oil stains. A warehouse, empty but for a few crates and the men who'd taken me. Their suits were sharp, their movements rehearsed, professionals. One of them crouched in front of me. He was older, with silver hair and a scar running down his cheek like a map of old violence. His voice was calm when he spoke, almost polite. You have caused us quite a lot of trouble, you know. I forced the words out through the dryness in my throat. You've got the wrong person. He smiled faintly. No, we don't. I don't even know who you are. Oh, but you do. He leaned closer, his eyes narrowing. You were there the night it all began. The night you pulled a dying man from the street and called for help. Tell me, did you ever wonder whose blood you washed off your hands? My breath stopped. The room tilted slightly. That was years ago. He nodded. And the man you saved, he was supposed to die that night. You changed everything. I swallowed hard. He wasn't one of you? No, he said quietly. He was one of them. And because of you, my brother never came home. The words hit harder than any blow could have. My mind flashed back to that night. The gunshots, the sirens, the man's broken whisper asking me to run. I had thought I was saving a stranger. But I had chosen sides without even knowing it. So this is about revenge, I said. He tilted his head. Not revenge. Balance. He stood, signaling to one of his men. Bring the camera. My pulse spiked. What are you going to do? He looked down at me like he was deciding whether I was worth explaining it to. A message. To remind him that debts are never forgotten, especially the ones paid in blood. The man behind me grabbed my hair, yanking my head back. Cold metal pressed against my temple. I wanted to scream, but all that came out was a whisper. Please don't. The older man smiled again, almost kindly. Do not blame yourself. You saved the wrong man, that is all. But do not worry, he will come for you. He always does. Something in his tone made me realize it was not mercy. It was strategy. I was bait again, just like before. Then, somewhere outside, a single shot rang out. The man froze. Another gunshot followed, closer this time. Then shouting, orders panic. The warehouse lights flickered. The silver-haired man turned toward the noise, barking. Find him! Gunfire exploded. The walls echoed with chaos, boots pounding, bullets slicing the air. I ducked, hands shaking, trying to loosen the ropes around my wrists. Every sound drew nearer. The ricochet of bullets, the crash of crates, the cries of men who suddenly weren't so calm anymore. And then, through the smoke and shouting, I heard it, that voice. Low, steady, and unmistakable. Get her out of here. My heart stopped. He had found me. Smoke filled the air like a living thing, thick and burning as gunfire tore through the warehouse. The echo of bullets became a heartbeat, drowning out everything else. I could hear shouts, men barking orders, glass shattering, steel groaning under the weight of chaos. The ropes around my wrists scraped raw skin as I pulled and twisted, the fibers cutting deeper with every desperate movement. Then, through the haze of noise, I saw him. He moved like a storm, silent, precise, inevitable. His men flanked him, shadows slicing through the fog, clearing paths with brutal efficiency. He was dressed in black, his shirt open at the collar, his face streaked with blood and determination. For one heartbeat, everything stilled. His eyes found mine. Even across that room of madness, I felt it, that same pulse that had bound us from the start. He shouted something, my name, maybe, and the sound cracked through me like lightning. A man lunged toward me, and before I could even scream, a gunshot dropped him mid-stride. Warm blood sprayed my arm, and I froze as the boss crossed the distance between us, kicking away debris. Are you hurt? His voice was sharp, clipped, trembling with the kind of fear men like him are not supposed to have. I am fine, I whispered, even though my hands were shaking. You should not have come. He tore the ropes apart with a knife, his touch rough but shaking. You think I would leave you here? I wanted to say yes, that he should have. That this was exactly what I had tried to prevent when I walked away. But the words refused to form. All I could do was look at him. The man whose world had consumed mine, whose darkness I had once thought I could save. Behind him, gunfire erupted again. One of his men fell, clutching his shoulder. Another dragged him behind a crate. The old man with the scar stepped from the shadows, a pistol aimed straight at us. Do you see? He called out, his voice slicing through the chaos. This is what your mercy creates. You save one monster and unleash 10 more. He lifted his gun, and I grabbed the boss's arm, pulling him back. The shot cracked, grazing the wall. He turned, firing twice. The older man stumbled, falling against a crate, clutching his chest. But even as he went down, his voice rasped through the air. You will not make it out alive. The boss's jaw clenched. He is right about one thing, he said quietly, turning to me. You should not have been part of this. My throat tightened. And you think I asked for it? His expression softened, just for a second. No, you just saved me when you should have run. Another explosion rocked the building, dust raining from the ceiling. He grabbed my hand. We have to move. Now. We ran, ducking behind steel pillars and fallen crates. The world was chaos, flashes of muzzle fire, men shouting, the stench of gunpowder thick in the air. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my teeth. Somewhere above, glass shattered, raining shards like diamonds. He pushed me down, covering me with his body as a bullet screamed past. Stay low, he said, voice shaking now. Do you trust me? I looked at him, at the man I had feared, hated, and loved all at once. I do, I breathed. We made it halfway to the door when I saw the movement, a flash of silver, a reflection in the dark. Another gunman, hidden in the rafters. I opened my mouth to warn him, but it was already too late. The shot rang out, louder than the rest. He turned instinctively, pushing me aside. The bullet struck him high in the chest, the force throwing him back. His body hit the concrete with a sickening sound. For a moment, the world went silent. No gunfire, no shouting, just the hollow echo of my own heartbeat. I crawled to him, my hands slick with his blood as I pressed them against the wound. No, stay with me, I said, my voice breaking. You promised me. You said I would be safe. He tried to speak, but blood filled his throat. He coughed, reaching for me, his hand trembling as it brushed my cheek. I told you. I could protect you, only if you stayed close. Do not say goodbye, I whispered, tears blurring everything. We are leaving together. You hear me? He tried to smile, but it came out as a breath, weak and fleeting. Around us, his men shouted, firing into the distance. One of them grabbed my shoulder, yelling that we had to move. I shook my head. I could not leave him. His eyes found mine again, the light in them fading but still fierce. "Run," he whispered. Then another explosion ripped through the far end of the warehouse, swallowing his voice, his warmth, everything. And as I was dragged out into the night, his blood still on my hands, one thought burned through the haze of sirens and smoke. I had saved his life once. But this time he had saved mine. Rain fell in thin, cold ribbons, washing the smoke from the air, but not the blood from my hands. The warehouse had burned itself quiet, only the slow hiss of fire eating through what was left. I stumbled through the wreckage, half blind, searching for him. My body moved without thought, drawn by a feeling stronger than pain, stronger than fear. And then I saw him, lying on the cracked concrete, chest rising shallowly, his hand reaching toward nothing. I fell to my knees beside him, the world shrinking to the sound of his ragged breath. His blood had spread across the floor in dark, glistening rivers, mixing with rainwater and ashes. I pressed my hands against his wound, but it was useless. The warmth was leaving him, slipping through my fingers like time itself. "Stay with me," I whispered, the words breaking. "Do you hear me? You promised." He tried to smile, his lips trembling. "You always believed promises," he murmured, his voice faint but steady. "Even from men who did not deserve them." I shook my head. "You do not get to talk like that. You are not leaving me again." His hand found mine, gripping weakly. 3 years ago," he said slowly, fighting for each breath, "when you saved me, I thought you were a ghost, something pure that did not belong in my world." His eyes flickered open, dark and full of something almost tender. "I tried to forget you, to keep you safe by staying gone. But I never could." Tears burned my eyes as the rain grew heavier, each drop carrying the metallic taste of memory. I brushed the hair from his face, my fingers trembling. "You did not forget," I whispered. "You kept that photograph. You watched me all this time." His chest rose with a shallow laugh that turned into a cough. Blood stained his teeth, but he kept looking at me as if I was the only light left. "You think you saved me that night," he said, his voice barely audible. "But you didn't. You became my reason to live." My heart broke open. I pressed my forehead to his, feeling his skin cold against mine. "Then live," I begged. "Please live for me." He exhaled softly, his breath ghosting against my cheek. "If I could," he whispered, "I would spend every life owing you one more." The sirens began to rise in the distance, faint at first, then louder, closing in. The same sound from that night years ago. The same sound that had bound our fates together. I looked around, flashing lights reflected on puddles, the smell of wet asphalt and smoke in the air. It felt like time had folded back on itself. The same girl holding the same man, both caught between saving and losing each other. "You will be all right," I said, not sure if I was lying for him or for myself. "Help is coming." He smiled faintly, his fingers brushing my cheek one last time. "Do not be afraid of the dark, Angel," he whispered. "It is the only place where I ever found you." His hand fell, the weight of it leaving an emptiness I could not describe. For a moment, everything stopped, the rain, the sirens, even my own heartbeat. Just silence. Just him. I stayed there, cradling him in my arms as red and blue lights washed over the ruins, painting everything in the colors of ending. I remembered the first time I saw him, bleeding on the street, whispering that I should run. I had not run then, and I would not run now. When they pulled me away, I could still feel the warmth of his blood seeping through my clothes. The medics shouted, but their words blurred into the sound of rain. Somewhere in the distance, the city kept moving, unaware that something extraordinary had just ended. I looked back one last time before they took him, his body half covered by a sheet, the rain tracing paths down his face like tears. And as the sirens wailed louder, I realized that the universe had a cruel kind of symmetry. 3 years ago, I had saved his life. Tonight, he saved mine. But in both stories, the rain fell the same way, red beneath the streetlights, cold against the skin, and endless. The world felt too quiet after the sirens stopped. The streets were clean again, but no one could wash away what had happened there. They asked me questions, detectives, doctors, people who wore sympathy like a uniform. I told them half-truths and careful lies, the kind that protect the dead and the living in equal measure. Every time I said his name, my voice trembled, but not from guilt. From memory. from the weight of all the things I could never say aloud, that the monster everyone feared had died saving a girl he once tried to destroy. His right-hand man found me outside the hospital, standing in the rain like I was waiting for him to come back. He didn't say much, he never did. Just a cigarette between his fingers, smoke curling into the gray morning. He wanted you safe, he said quietly. That was his only order. Something inside me broke then, not from grief, but from understanding. Even in his last breath, he had been trying to save me from the world, from himself. Maybe from the truth. When I went home, or what passed for home now, the city felt unfamiliar. Every sound echoed differently, like it was missing its anchor. I tried to sleep, but the silence pressed too close. That was when I noticed it, a plain brown envelope on the table. No name, no return address. Inside was a single silver key and a small note written in his handwriting. Come home. My breath caught. For a moment, I didn't know whether to cry, run, or follow. But deep down, I already knew, some ghosts don't ask for goodbyes. They leave you directions. The key led me to the edge of the city, to a forgotten place where the skyline gave way to silence. An old farmhouse stood there, half hidden behind ivy and broken fences. The kind of place where secrets could breathe without being found. My hands shook as I turned the key. The door creaked open to the faint smell of coffee and gun oil. The scent of a memory I thought I had buried. He was there. Alive. The man I had mourned. The man I had loved in silence. He stood by the window, his arm in a sling, his face marked by the battle we barely survived. But his eyes, they were the same. Tired, fierce, impossibly tender. Neither of us spoke at first. Words felt too small for everything we had lost and found again. When I finally stepped closer, he smiled. Not the smile of a man who had cheated death, but of one who finally understood life. I told you I'd protect you, he said softly. I just didn't know it would cost everything. I touched his hand, feeling the pulse of something fragile and infinite beneath the scars. The air between us felt alive again, trembling with the weight of what could be. Then he looked at me, voice low, almost pleading. Would you stay in the dark, he asked, if it meant never being alone again? The question hung there, more dangerous than any bullet, more beautiful than any promise. And I realized then, sometimes love doesn't save you. It just gives you a place to hide. I used to believe saving someone meant pulling them out of the dark. That redemption was clean, that goodness could erase what came before. But I know better now. Some souls are not meant to be washed white. They are meant to burn until the fire softens into light. He was my fire. The man they called a devil, the name whispered in fear. But when I looked at him, I saw something no one else did, a man trying to remember how to be human. We built our lives in the shadows, far from the noise of the city and the ghosts it carried. Some nights he would sit by the window, the same way he had in that restaurant years ago, and I'd catch him staring at me like I was the one who'd survived. Maybe I was. One night, he broke the silence with a smile that didn't belong to the man I first met. The night you dropped that tray, he said, voice low and raw. You shattered my silence. You made me want to live loud again. I wanted to tell him that he'd saved me too, not from death, but from emptiness. From a life that meant nothing. So I stayed. Not because it was safe. Not because it was easy. But because I had finally understood. Peace is not the absence of danger. It's the presence of someone worth risking everything for. They still whisper about him. The devil who vanished, the girl who followed. They say monsters can't love. Maybe that's true. But he tried. And sometimes trying is what saves us.